Attraction rarely announces itself. It moves quietly, beneath words, beneath gestures, beneath what is openly said. People reveal interest not through confession, but through alignment. Attention lingers. Silence behaves differently. Presence carries weight. Machiavelli understood that human intention is rarely honest on the surface. In The Prince, he observed that people show their true loyalties through behavior, not promises. The same principle applies to desire. This is not a story about romance. It is a study of perception, of power, of the subtle psychological signals that appear when someone is drawn toward another, often before they understand it themselves. There is a moment before certainty arrives, before language forms, before intention is admitted. It begins as a quiet shift. Machiavelli understood that people rarely reveal their intentions directly. In The Prince, he noted that truth appears first in behavior, not in words. Attraction follows the same rule. When someone likes another, their behavior reorganizes. Not dramatically, subtly. Attention narrows. Presence sharpens. Time behaves differently. Psychologically, the nervous system assigns importance before the mind agrees. The body leans in before logic catches up. Recognition is not about pursuit. It is about priority. The person listens when they do not need to. Remember details without trying. Appears when absence would be easier. These are not performances. They are leaks. Human beings struggle to hide what matters to them. Machiavelli believed that actions taken without obligation reveal true intent. When someone offers attention without being asked, something internal has shifted. Interest often disguises itself as politeness, as coincidence, as neutrality. But neutrality behaves differently when desire is present. Responses become measured. A contact holds longer. Words are chosen with care. This restraint is not disinterest. It is self-protection. Desire threatens balance. It exposes vulnerability. So attraction hesitates. The person hovers between expression and concealment, between closeness and control. Recognition happens when this pattern repeats. Once may be a chance, twice invites curiosity. Consistency reveals truth. The observer senses it not because something is declared, but because something is restrained. This is the first psychological fact Machiavelli would recognize. Before someone admits they like you, their behavior already has. Desire is rarely expressed freely. It is measured, contained, often hidden behind calm. Machiavelli understood that exposure weakens position. He observed that people guard what places them at risk. To desire someone is to surrender a degree of control, and human beings resist that. Attraction creates imbalance. It shifts power inward. The person who cares more feels vulnerable to loss, rejection, or dependence. So desire is concealed, not because it is weak, but because it is valuable. Psychologically, concealment is a form of self-defense. The mind weighs risk before expression. What if interest is not returned? What if advantage is lost? What if emotional leverage shifts? Machiavelli would recognize this calculation. People reveal intentions only when it benefits them. Until then, they observe. This is why attraction often appears contradictory. Someone may show interest through attention, then withdraw through distance. They speak warmly, then become reserved. This inconsistency is not confusing. It is a conflict. One impulse seeks closeness. The other protects authority. Desire threatens autonomy. It creates attachment. And attachment, in Machiavelli's view, creates dependency. So people delay confession. They test reactions. They study outcomes. They reveal interest indirectly, through presence rather than declaration. Silence becomes strategic. Restraint becomes safety. This concealment is also social. Admitting attraction risks embarrassment. It invites judgment. It exposes emotional needs. So desire is softened, hidden under humor, disguised as a casual concern. Machiavelli believed that people rarely move unless advantage outweighs risk. Attraction is no exception. Until safety is perceived, desire remains quiet. This is why words are unreliable indicators of interest. Behavior carries the truth. Desire hides, but it does not disappear. It waits, and in waiting, it reveals itself through subtle alignment rather than confession. When desire is concealed, it does not vanish. It changes form. Machiavelli understood that people communicate intent through action long before they use words. In The Prince, he wrote that appearances often speak louder than declarations. Human psychology follows this pattern. Attraction leaks through behavior, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistency. Signals appear in timing, in proximity, in attention that feels deliberate rather than random. Psychologically, the brain prioritizes what it values. Attention follows emotional relevance. A person who likes someone unconsciously orients toward them. They respond faster or with more care. They notice subtle shifts in mood. They adjust behavior without being asked. These are not strategies. They are reflexes. The nervous system aligns before conscious thought intervenes. Machiavelli believed that true motives are revealed when behavior is unnecessary. When someone invests energy without obligation, interest is present. Signals are often misread because they are quiet. People expect attraction to be loud. Confidence, direct, but restraint often indicates value. A person who is indifferent behaves casually. A person who cares behaves carefully. Words are measured. Boundaries are respected. Presence is intentional. There is also repetition. Signals are not isolated acts. They form patterns. Repeated attention, repeated availability, repeated awareness. Consistency is the strongest indicator. Machiavelli warned against trusting single actions. He advised watching patterns over time. Attraction reveals itself through return. The person returns to conversation, returns to contact, returns to proximity. Even when distance would be easier, silence, too, can be a signal. Not absence, but controlled distance. A person may withdraw slightly to maintain composure, yet never fully disengage. They remain reachable, attentive, present in subtle ways. This balance between closeness and restraint is psychological tension. It reflects desire under control. Signals are not accidental. They are the language of concealed intention. Those who observe calmly can read them, not by chasing meaning, but by noticing alignment. Attraction speaks quietly. It always has. Machiavelli understood that human intention is rarely honest on the surface. Even after clarity and emotional stability, true desire continues to whisper in behavior, not in proclamation. The careful alignment, the steady attention, the gentle consideration, these remain. They are the quiet markers of interest, the silent signals that endure beyond performance. Here, attraction has become fully integrated. It is no longer a test, no longer a calculation. It simply is. The nervous system no longer hesitates. The mind no longer doubts. The person shows up, not because of obligation, not because of need, but because presence itself has become meaningful. This quiet truth is deceptively simple. Attention, consistency, presence, subtlety. These are the ultimate expressions of desire. No confession is necessary. No grand gesture is required. The pattern itself speaks. It speaks louder than words, louder than intensity, louder than uncertainty ever could. And in this quiet resonance, attraction finds permanence. It is steady, sustained, reliable. It exists without threatening balance. It expresses care without dependency. It creates trust, safety, and unspoken understanding. The observer senses it without chasing it, because attraction, at its most refined, does not need to declare itself. It is not performed. It is revealed, not through urgency, but through alignment, not through drama, but through quiet truth. This is the poetic closure of desire, a presence that endures, a consistency that reassures, a subtle magnetism that moves silently, yet unmistakably. And in that silence, one can finally understand. Attraction is never loud. It is never forced. It is always quietly, persistently, inherently true. Machiavelli believed that prolonged hesitation eventually weakens position more than action. In The Prince, he noted that uncertainty erodes authority from within. The same is true emotionally. The turning point arrives when resistance becomes heavier than risk. Psychologically, the mind tires of holding tension. The nervous system seeks resolution. At this stage, attraction no longer fluctuates. It stabilizes. Behavior grows consistently. Presence becomes reliable. Attention no longer hides behind ambiguity. This does not always mean open expression. It means clarity. The person stops testing reactions and begins aligning behavior with feeling. They no longer pull away to regain control. Control has been internally reestablished. Machiavelli understood that power is strongest when it is quiet and certain. Once internal balance is restored, expression no longer feels dangerous. Interest becomes calm. The person is no longer managing desire. They're allowing it. This clarity shifts energy. Interactions feel steadier. Communication feels grounded. There is less emotional fluctuation. The observer notices the change, not through intensity, but through ease. The person no longer performs restraint. They no longer overcorrect closeness with distance. They show up without explanation. They stay without justification. This is the psychological transition from guarded attraction to integrated intent. The fear of vulnerability does not disappear. It becomes tolerable. Machiavelli would recognize this moment as strategic alignment. When desire no longer threatens position, it can be sustained. Clarity is not urgent. It is calm. It does not demand a response. It does not seek reassurance. It simply exists. This turning point is subtle but decisive. Attraction moves from internal conflict to internal agreement. And once that agreement is reached, behavior stops wavering. It settles. After clarity comes integration. This is the stage where emotion no longer demands management. It becomes part of the internal structure. Machiavelli understood that stability is the foundation of power. He emphasized that once control is established, it must be maintained quietly. Emotion follows the same principle. When attraction is integrated, it stops disrupting behavior. The person no longer monitors themselves. They no longer calculate every response. Desire no longer feels like a threat. Psychologically, the nervous system settles. Emotional energy evens out. Attention becomes steady rather than reactive. Presence feels natural instead of effortful. This is not indifference. It is regulation. Interest remains, but it no longer destabilizes identity. The person does not rush. They do not withdraw. They do not seek reassurance. They simply remain consistent. Machiavelli believed that consistency signals strength. Erratic behavior invites misinterpretation and loss of authority. Emotionally, the same rule applies. At this stage, attraction is expressed through reliability. The person listens without urgency, responds without anxiety, shows interest without pressure. There's no longer a need to prove feelings. Feeling is assumed internally. This stability is often misread as detachment, but it is not absence of care. It is care without fear. The individual is no longer negotiating power internally. They have accepted the presence of desire without surrendering control. This is emotional maturity. Interest exists without dependency. Connection exists without loss of self. Machiavelli warned that reliance weakens position. Integration prevents reliance. Attraction becomes grounded, calm, sustainable. The observer feels this as safety, not excitement, not intensity, but steadiness. And steadiness, in human psychology, creates trust. This is where attraction stops fluctuating and becomes part of the emotional landscape. Machiavelli understood that human intention is rarely honest on the surface. Even after clarity and emotional stability, true desire continues to whisper in behavior, not in proclamation. The careful alignment, the steady attention, the gentle consideration, these remain. They are the quiet markers of interest, the silent signals that endure beyond performance. Here, attraction has become fully integrated. It is no longer a test, no longer a calculation. It simply is. The nervous system no longer hesitates. The mind no longer doubts. The person shows up, not because of obligation, not because of need, but because presence itself has become meaningful. This quiet truth is deceptively simple. Attention, consistency, presence, subtlety. These are the ultimate expressions of desire. No confession is necessary. No grand gesture is required. The pattern itself speaks. It speaks louder than words, louder than intensity, louder than uncertainty ever could. And in this quiet resonance, attraction finds permanence. It is steady, sustained, reliable. It exists without threatening balance. It expresses care without dependency. It creates trust, safety, and unspoken understanding. The observer senses it without chasing it, because attraction, at its most refined, does not need to declare itself. It is not performed, it is revealed, not through urgency, but through alignment, not through drama, but through quiet truth. This is the poetic closure of desire, a presence that endures, a consistency that reassures, a subtle magnetism that moves silently, yet unmistakably. And in that silence, one can finally understand. Attraction is never loud. It is never forced. It is always quietly, persistently, inherently true.